150, 160. He's gone.
What's up, guys? Today I'm going to be showing you how to do replace the front fork seal on a 2008 Buell 1125R. This same procedure applies to pretty much every upside down fork on the market, and so it's pretty generic. We're going to show you how to do it on the Buell. First things first, the single most important thing you will do in the entire procedure is this right here. You want the rear end to be fixed, you want to be able to lift the whole bike off the ground, and you want to strap it down so that you can do things like this without worrying about a 500-pound bike falling over you. It's not going to be perfect, but you really want it to be as stable as you can. And in this case, because it's got the underbody exhaust, I actually have to remove the exhaust to get a good flat surface to use. And as you can see, I use several 2x4s to get up underneath that engine. And that's really all the space you need. You just need enough to drop out the front wheel and to remove the fork out the bottom. That's number one. So before you get into this project, make sure you have a good way of securing the bike. What I've seen some people do is they will, depending on how this is set up, what you can do is you can bolt a 2x4 to the ceiling, then use ratchet straps to pick up the front of the bike, or use a cherry picker. I found that those tend to be unbalanced and unstable, and this is really the best way of doing this, doing it in a safe way. So now let's go over to the bench and take a look at the tools you're going to be needing. Tool number one, both of these are actually from a company called Traxion. So this tool right here is called your fork compression tool. It's only about $20, and this is money well spent. Even if you only ever do one fork seal change, this is going to be worth it. So basically what you're going to do is, and I'll show you how to do this when we get there, these will actually pinch the lower fork tube, allow you to push down, and then this key slides in like this and lets you lock out the dampening assembly to remove the dampening assembly to disassemble the fork. So this whole kit is only $20. It's really well made, and it'll be the last fork compression kit you'll ever have to buy. This right here is about $15. It also comes from Traxion. It's just a generic bleeder tool, and when you bleed a fork, all you end up doing is basically running the dampening rod up and down, and when it gets all the way down there, it's really hard to reach with your fingers. Some people use pliers. I love tools. I think that for 15 bucks this is worthwhile. It's got 4 different kinds of threads, so pretty much every Japanese or American inverted fork you can do with this tool. Basically just screws into the top of the rod and lets you move it up and down without getting your hands stuck down in the fork. This is a piece of 2-inch PVC. These are 47mm fork. You want to use a 2-inch piece of PVC. This is going to use as a slide hammer to knock in the seals. If you have a XB12 or an XB9, it's a 43mm fork, I believe. That's 1 3/4 inch or 1.5. This is 2-inch PVC, and you cut a slot in it and lets you kind of bend it in and knock that stuff in. This is a fork level tool. These are generic. Basically all it is a giant syringe and a ruler. And what you do is, once you figure out what level the fork fluid has to be at, you can use this to easily remove a small amount or insert a small amount of fluid to get the level exactly where you want it. And I'll show you guys how to do that later. This is 10 bucks, and it's also worth it. Moving on to the parts you will need. You'll need 2 dust boots, which for this bike are part JB130.3AK. You will need 2 fork seals, which are part JB127.3AK. I always replace these. You don't have to. These are the circlips that hold these seals in. They're usually about $1, $1.50 a piece. And so for peace of mind, I always replace them, and they are JB126.3AK. Interestingly enough, these are genuine Harley parts that are made in Japan. So go figure. I actually got this stuff from the Harley dealer. It was cheaper than buying it online, so your mileage may vary, but check them out. Harley sells 2 kinds of fork oil. The first is the standard Type E fork oil. It's equivalent to about a 5-weight oil. They also sell this Screaming Eagle Performance Parts Heavy Fork Oil, which is equivalent to about a 20-weight oil. I'm using the heavyweight oil because I'm a heavyweight kind of guy, and this tends to be a little bit better oil. You can use El Rey Labs makes oil. Pretty much everybody in the motorcycle world makes fork oil, but this was only $7.95. It actually per bottle actually costs the same as the regular weight stuff, so I just went ahead and got that from the Harley dealer as well. Those are all the parts you need, and all the tools you need. Realistically, you can probably get away without this. You can get away without this if you're careful. This costs a couple of bucks. You're gonna need it. You need something to hammer it in with. This tool right here, you can use a piece of angle iron and some ratchet straps and some other bullshit, but really the correct way of doing it is to buy the $20 tool, borrow it from someone who has one. For me, I don't do a whole lot of forks, but if I ever need to do another one again, I have this, and it was worth it to buy. So that's pretty much it. So now we're gonna move on to disassembling the front end. The other thing you want is you want to disassemble the bike, and you're going to need an area to work in. I'm going to do it over here because generally the best way to do forks is to basically sit down and have it between your legs, and that makes everything a little bit easier to work on. Having a vise and putting a piece of cloth in it can be useful sometimes too, depending on how your environment is set up and what you're doing, but we'll see about that when we get to it. And so as we go through this, I'll show you guys how to take everything apart, put it all back together, all the specs you're going to need for this bike. But again, this DIY should be applicable to pretty much every upside down fork on the market. So the first thing you want to do is you want to get a T30 Torx bit and break loose and remove all of these bolts that are holding on this fairing, or this little front fairing. And by the look of it, there is just 4 of them, 2 on each side. The next step is to remove the brake caliper, and for that you're going to need an 8mm Allen head. Next step is to loosen the bolts that hold the front axle in place, and those are going to be what? 6mm. And these bolts you don't have to remove, you just have to loosen. And then to unscrew the axle, you're going to need one of these tools or a bolt. Let's see what size it is. That's about right. So you're going to need a 22mm hex or one of these handy dandy front bits, and apparently it's threaded in the other direction. So that's good to know. That's really nice of them to put right there. Keep in mind, this is a left-hand threaded bit, apparently. You can just kind of support the wheel and remove the axle. Now if we go over here to where the brake is, we can push the wheel a little further back, which gives us a little bit of space. I might need a rubber hammer. It's not uncommon. So there's our front brake. Now we can just roll the wheel out of here. My wheel is going to need a good cleaning because it's covered in fluid from the forks. Okay, so the next step is removing and rebuilding the forks. Unless there's a reason, I personally prefer just removing one fork, rebuilding one fork, putting it back in, remove the next fork, rebuild it, put it back in, and so forth. To remove the forks, there's usually an upper and a lower triple tree clamp. So the upper is right here and the lower is down here, and there's 2 bolts down there. And they're all gonna be 6mm hex head. So you wanna make sure you get that in there nicely, and then you just wanna, thread them loose. You don't have to take them out, basically like that. They're not holding any pressure. And if you can see down in here is the second ones. And these forks have this little band right there and help you set the fork up. See, it goes only up to a certain height. So what you want to do is you want to drop it down, wedge, screwdriver very gently, and just work your way around like that. So once it's up on the fork, as we pull it down, we can just pull it off the top. And now the whole fork slides right out. And as you can see, this was leaking pretty bad. You can just see that there's a ton of fluid on here. Now we're just going to set this over here for a minute. Make sure you put everything apart and together in the right order. We're going to do standard procedure. A couple of these blue paper towels, lay them out. And the first thing is this guy. And also we're going to clean everything as we lay it out. So start with this. So a couple of notes about the setup. First of all, we got our pan down here because there's still some oil in here and it's going to leak out, or that you're going to want to do, is remove spring cap. And on this bike, it's a 24mm. A lot of bikes, a lot of the older bikes, a much larger unit. I've noticed in some of the Suzukis, up to 32 millimeters. We're just gonna shoot this guy off. Okay, so now that you've taken this out, if you just lift this up, you can see this is coming out. And these are the holes I was talking about earlier. So the next step is we're gonna loosen our vise here, slide this guy out, and you want to set this down on the ground like this, and so that it'll hopefully stand on its own. Having a piece of heavy steel rod can help sometimes, just kind of holding this in place so you can step on it to hold it down in place. Now we're going to get our fork compression tool. We're going to slide it down over, and it's actually going to screw right into these holes. You want to kind of try to center it a little bit. Screw it on until it's snug, and you want to keep this close by because we're going to have to slide it on. I don't know if the camera is going to be able to catch this effectively, but when I push down on this, you can see there's nuts right there. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to fit this in there. And this can be kind of tricky with just one person. Just like that. You want to compress it like that because what you're looking for is those 2 nuts right there. One is going to be a 14, one's going to be a 17. The 14 is a lock nut, the 17 is what holds the dampening rod in. So now we're going to be able to remove it. Now what you want to do is you want to get in here There's a 14 millimeter. Then just shoot that off. Then gently remove the dampening rod. Wipe it down. Set it over here. Move this little white spacer thing. Wipe that off. Set it over here. I guess I'll do that. Now you just want to gently push down on this and remove that. Put that over there. Take this guy. That over there. Set that over there. Bleed this out. There's our spring. That over there. Now we can set this up right. Make a giant fucking mess everywhere. Please remove this so that we can rebuild it. This thing we need to clean. So now we can break this down and replace it. The first thing is you're going to need a small screwdriver, and you're going to want to very, very gently just work your way around and pop out. This is the what's called the dust seal, and it should come out by hand. Usually, unless they're really, really worn, these are usually okay. The next step is you want to take out the circlip, and again, being careful, you just want to use a little screwdriver. Take that out. And next, we have our oil seal, which actually doesn't feel that bad, so that's kind of scary. But here, you just want to be careful to only apply force to the seal so as not to damage anything or scratch anything. So now we can remove this little spacer and clean out all of this. Now you can also replace this bearing in here, but ours shows no signs of wear, and usually you don't have to replace it if it's leaking. It won't cause it to leak. It'll cause the fork bind and do all kinds of nasty stuff, but usually leak isn't the issue. So here's our seal. This is the inside of the seal that has the channel in it. This is the outside of the seal, so it's going to go in like that. But we do that. It's always a good idea. Dunk your finger in some clean, fresh oil and lube up the seal. You want it to go in there. Never want to go in dry. Always want to have a little lubrication in there. Ease things along. Thankfully, though, the motorcycle, you don't have to buy a dinner first. So, first thing is, don't forget your little washer. I think it came out like this, so we're going to put it back in. There's some grooves on this side. I don't know that it matters. So that goes in. Next, this guy goes in. And you want to get it as square as you can with your hands first. And then you can just take your little tool so you can see how it fits in there. That's also an effective strategy. And so if you take a close look at it, and I don't know if the camera is going to have the resolution to catch this, but you can see the bottom of it is pretty level. And most importantly, you can see up here, see right in here, you see how this groove is entirely clear? That's good, because that is where our little circlip goes. And like I said, the other one looks like it's in perfect condition, and you don't really have to change these out if you don't want to. But like I said, they were like $1.50 or something, so I just got them. Never hurts anything to put in new parts. So on this one, you just want to put it in there like that. And now we just need a new dust seal, which is this guy. And with the dust seal, again, we're going to want to not go too crazy with it, but you're going to want to lubricate this kind of inside surfaces of the dust seal, because you want them to go in nice and smooth. And generally speaking, you should be able to put the dust seal in just by hand, like that. And you can see the dust seal is in there nicely. We can just wipe it down, clean up the outside. That part of the fork rebuild is done. Now, all we got to do is make sure this is all empty. Bring this up here. We're going to clean this up real quick. And just basically wiping this down with just a little bit of oil. Help make this smooth. Now you just slide this bag down, all the way down. And now, back into our vise. Just be cognizant of the fact that there's nothing really holding this bottom part in. On my vise, it happens to press against that plate a little bit, which is going to keep it in there, but generally speaking it would just fall out. And so now we can thread this guy on there. So now we can pump the dampening rod, and when we fill it up with fluid, that'll make it a lot easier for us. You want to make sure this stays tight, because you're going to have to take a measurement. Now when you go into the service manual here, it'll show you that the fork oil level is 94 millimeters, and as you can see, this is the fork oil level. This is what number one is the outer tube. So this distance right here is fork oil level. So that needs to be, so basically when this is fully compressed, basically 94 millimeters down from here is where the fork oil should be. And they give you this spiffy little gauge you can like stick down in there and whatever. It's a huge pain in the butt. So what we're going to do is we're going to quickly make a little dipstick that's 94 millimeters in length. Grab this. We want 94 millimeters. That right there is 94 millimeters. So there we go. Our little dipstick is exactly 94 millimeters. And we can pump our dampening rod. So what we're going to do is we're going to just hang this down here. And we can put some oil in this. And the way you want to do this is you want to just pour some oil in there. And this is 1 pint, 473 milliliters. You're going to need about 400 milliliters. So you basically need one of those for each. And you can feel this just tightening up as it pushes all the air out and all the fluid in. I mean, look how much, oh, oops. See, that's what I was talking about. Dipstick, totally dry. But we got most of the air bled out of there, which is easier without the huge volume of oil. So this is what happens when you take advice from the internet. The old 43 millimeter forks had much less fluid in them, and so you're actually probably going to need 3 of these. And obviously the Harley dealer's closed today because that's my luck. But you're going to need about 1.5 of these things per fork. And now if we take our little tool and drop it into the lowest part right there, you can see the very end of it. It has just a little bit of fork oil on it. And what you do is you take this and you drop it down in there, and basically you overfill it, and then you suck out what you don't need, and then you're done. Unfortunately, I will have to do the second fork only halfway because I won't have enough oil to finish it until tomorrow evening. So now you want to take your damper tool, give it 1 or 2 more good pumps, take a paper towel, clean everything up. Now we can begin reassembling everything. So first goes in the spring. These are linear springs, and so it doesn't matter which end you put them in. So you just gently lower that down into the oil. Bloop. Then you can put this guy on. That's it. Then you want to pull this up, and remember, you want to pull that up and just let it stay for a minute, because now we got to put this toolkit back on so we can compress this guy. And so again, remember, make sure you support your fork down here, because otherwise it's just going to slip out at this point. So we set it on the ground, put our little piece of steel through. So unfortunately there's nobody here to help me with this, so we're gonna have to figure out something creative. Find one of those grooves and just pull that tight, and that'll let us keep this up. And I'm gonna put this in my mouth and keep this up and push down. There we go. Take this little string off, and we can unscrew this guy, clean that off in a minute, put that guy on there, and you're going to get a little bit of overage, and you can just spin this guy on, put the wrench on there, because there's a certain gap that it's supposed to be set at, and just give it a quick smack like that, and it's all set. Slide that out, press down on this and slide that out, slide that out. Make sure this isn't cross-threaded. Don't want to do that. Tighten it down. Now we can hit it with the impact, and we can inspect our handiwork. Make sure you clean everything off real nicely one last time. You're gonna have to put the fork in the bottom one first, walk that down, and then slide that in. At that point, just make sure that this is up flush where it's supposed to be. And just like that, fork number 1 is done. Now we're going to do fork number 2. And just like that, forks are beautiful and rebuilt, and it's all back together. A few things that you want to keep in mind when you're putting this wheel back on is remember this is reverse threaded, so you'll go, instead of righty-tighty, you'll actually go lefty-tighty. And what I found to be the easiest is to put the wheel in its place with the caliper in here, bolt the caliper to the fork, and then find the axle. And of course, when you're done with the axle, make sure that you tighten these two holder bolts right here. And that's pretty much it. Lessons learned is, you know, make sure that you have that third bottle of fluid for this bike, because it's got the larger 47mm forks. Other than that, it went really well. And remember, if you use the heavier fluid, there's a good chance that your suspension settings are going to be off a little bit, and you're going to want to back out both the compression and the rebound. Preload's going to stay the same though. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to subscribe and check out my other Buell videos.